Well, that was a fairly expectable decision because in the oral arguments, which is when the lawyers present their case to the court, the lines of questioning from almost all of the justices were critical of the idea that Donald Trump should be barred from the ballot because he's an insurrectionist. The state of Colorado's Supreme Court and the state of Maine's electoral official had both come to the decision that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which was adopted immediately after the Civil War when the South had seceded and rebelled against the Union, applied to Donald Trump and the events of January 2021 when there were riots at the Capitol. And the Supreme Court stated, in essence, it's not clear what an insurrectionist is, and we need Congress to define this before states can begin striking people from the ballot. And that was a unanimous decision, meaning all justices, whether appointed by Democrats or Republicans, agreed with it, presumably on the basis that otherwise it would open up electoral chaos in which potentially partisan electoral officials in various states could be striking other people from the ballot on spurious grounds. And so there needed to be some definitional clarity. He's already very difficult to stop. Let's put it that way. I mean, the only primary that Nikki Haley, his sole remaining competitor, has won is the District of Columbia with 6 delegates. She's got a handful of delegates to his, but he's way ahead of her and presumably will be after tomorrow when he's likely to win huge states like Texas and California. You'd think California might be more of a liberal state, but they're structured in such a way that it advantages Trump within the Republican primary there. Yeah, he'll be almost impossible to stop if he does as well as we expect him to do tomorrow. I would say that she's likely to give us clear indication tomorrow night because she's cleared her whole schedule. She has nothing planned for after tomorrow. Either she's going a conventional route or an unconventional route. I assign about 60% chance to the conventional route, which I'll lay out, and then I'll lay out the unconventional route. The conventional route is that she's aiming for 2028, that she's stayed in the race this long simply because she's preparing the groundwork for a presidential campaign in the next cycle when Trump is no longer a candidate. And she's amassing lists of names of supporters. She's getting her name more visible in all of these states. She's building a media presence, and she's building lists of fundraisers and amassing actually a campaign war chest that she's not going to spend fully and she can carry through to the next cycle. If that's the case, she'll bow out tomorrow night. It'll be interesting to see whether she endorses Donald Trump or not. There are a lot of kind of ways she might bow out that are uncertain. There's a smaller chance, but a kind of intriguing one, that she's remained in the race this long in order to pivot to an independent candidacy. And if she does that, it'll throw a wrench into the works for both Biden and Trump. The polls are dismal for both of them in terms of their negatives. Trump perceived as too dangerous by most American voters and opening up the door to all of the chaos that he wrought. And Biden as too feeble and, geriatric for the job. And the possibility exists, therefore, for an unusual opening for a third party. And there is this small independent effort called No Labels of centrists who are looking for some alternative to Trump and Biden and who actually have secured for their party, this No Labels party, 50 states ballot access. And they haven't been able to get a prominent enough candidate on board. They tried Senator Joe Manchin and he declined. If she wants to, then she can be on the ballot in every state in November. And she could take that war chest that she's amassed and all that support she's amassed from people. It is interesting that Trump, a former president who's very popular with much of the Republican base, has still been losing something like 35 to 45% of the vote, depending on the state, to her. That's not an excellent performance for a former president. It shows a lot of reservations even among Republicans about whether he can beat Biden and about whether they want him in again. So Haley has a pathway to do that if she chooses to do it. And so we'll see tomorrow night. But I think one way or the other, it's going to be clear. I don't think she's going to just persist in this quixotic campaign for the presidency on the Republican ticket all the way to the convention. It's unlikely. She could suspend her campaign in order that if Trump, gets a felony indictment or otherwise implodes later in the summer, that she could step in. But, most likely she's going to bow out or else take this independent route. We'll see. I've been thinking back. There was the Perot campaign of the early 90s, and that's about the closest I can imagine to this. Which, many Republicans blamed for the loss of Bush 1, the first Bush president in 1992. And then in the late 90s, there was the Ralph Nader campaign on the Green Party that siphoned off enough Democratic votes. Some argue that Bush 2 was elected, so it kind of worked both ways. But we haven't seen a strong independent campaign since then, in about a quarter century. And it seems like this is the year where, if any year presented itself, where there'd be a huge opportunity. But the point I'm driving at is that it's extremely hard for independent campaigns to win in the United States. It's extremely hard to get voters who are used to voting for the major parties to vote for you. It's extremely hard then to win whole state contests against the conventional candidates. So she's probably weighing that. And no, I think it would burn her bridges with Republicans, because above all, they don't want another Biden presidency. Most Democrats are scared witless at the situation. I mean, we have a president who was accused by an independent prosecutor of being forgetful in the interviews related to the potential crime he had committed, which the prosecutor absolved him of removing classified information illegally from the White House. But the same prosecutor said, he was he couldn't remember half the things, including the year his son died and so forth. Biden comes out, has a press conference to supposedly refute this idea that he's not capable, mentally fit. And in that very press conference, confuses the head of Mexico with the head of Egypt in referring to the Gaza conflict.
Initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. Take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? I guess I just forgot what was going on.
We're going to have the State of the Union address on Thursday. It's an extremely important address for Biden. Can he sustain himself for a full hour? Is he going to flag? Is it going to be a disaster, or is he going to pull it off and be convincing in the function of president of the United States and have some energy and some conviction and so forth? But there's a lot of chatter on the side among Democrats about, could there be a way of freeing up his delegates and allowing them to vote for some alternative? Who, it would have to be somebody formidable like Michelle Obama stepping into the role. And it seems highly unlikely that either Biden wants it or that anybody else is going to want to, have that happen. And the chaos that would come of that might be ineffectual against Trump. So I have the feeling that come November, most voters are going to be voting against what they don't want rather than enthusiastically for what they you know, for where they tick the box, Biden or Trump, if that's what it comes down to. The polls are running in Trump's favor. But, you know, even a month is an eternity in American politics. A lot can go akimbo between now and then. For instance, if he had a felony conviction, would his poll numbers erode? Or if, you know, something happens in a health crisis for him, he's not always been the most physically fit example of the human specimen. So, you know, they're both quite old. They both would be very elderly, and yeah, it's impossible to tell. You'd have to give the nod to Trump right now. You would have to, based on the polling data. But polls have been wrong in the past, and there's a lot that can occur in the next half year.